Hi, everybody. I received a recent request from several employees in organizations who are interested in speaking to their HR, human resource departments, to request support for employee caregivers, but they really don't know where to start or how to approach the subject. So this video responds to questions that employee caregivers are asking about how to get my company involved, how to get my company to recognize family caregivers and to give us some support. The topic of corporate employer caregiver programs comes up really a lot frequently, especially in organizations that are involved in the healthcare industry. So maybe doctors' offices, hospital systems, in-home care agencies, assisted living communities, and other organizations that support caregivers. And the topic comes up more in those organizations because, believe it or not, people who are employed as caregivers are also more likely to be family caregivers. And if you work in one of these companies, you know that the turnover is extremely high because all of these caregivers, in addition to doing their caregiver work from 8 to 5 or whatever their shifts are, they're also caregivers at home. So if you're an employee whose company doesn't yet offer programs for working caregivers, stay with me. There's a lot of information in this video and on a page on my website that I'm going to mention, and I'll also put the link below that you can share with your human resources department, especially if you don't know how to bring this subject up. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. My website is pameladwilson.com. On there's so much help, hope, and support for caregivers. My online webinar course, my podcast, The Caring Generation. There are links to my caregiver support group on Facebook. It's called The Caregiving Trap. A lot of hope, help, and support here on my YouTube channel. Please share and like these videos. There are over 800 here. And super important, below this video down there, I'm going to put a link to a page on my website that has a lot of research articles, statistics, information that human resource departments would find interesting about caregivers. So let me start by sharing a very common scenario that at least 20 to 30% of employees who are caregivers face, even though a lot of times these employees don't see themselves as caregivers. If you're watching this and you don't think you're a caregiver, but you're helping out your aging parents or grandma or grandpa or somebody who's older in your family, you are a caregiver. So if you work and you care for any family member, babies, young children, aging parents, a spouse, siblings, a friend, anybody, you know how challenging it is from both a mental health perspective and a physical perspective and a time perspective. Because if we are honest, when you work, right, your time isn't your own. It belongs to the company as it should that you work for, who's paying you in return for your time and your skills and all of your effort, right? But the problem is there's this gap that happens, right, when you become a caregiver and you've got all these competing priorities between work and family and how do I do all these things. And sometimes there's a struggle because the businesses that you may need to contact are only open during the hours that you work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 6. And this whole family caregiving part over here is becoming more problematic because you have a sick person that you're caring for. They have to go to the doctor and you have to contact their health insurance company and maybe they need prescriptions and they're having problems living alone. Maybe they've got dementia or Alzheimer's, they're forgetful. Maybe your parents are calling you 10 times a day at work because they need something. And then on top of all of this stress, right, they have care expenses that they can't pay because they're on a limited income. And so now they're depending on you and your family to financially support their care needs. So the bottom line is there's a whole lot of stress that affects working caregivers, not to mention the stress that affects your health. And maybe you're at the point where you are struggling and you don't want to mention this caregiving issue to your supervisor because it's going to look like you have this personal problem that means that you can't do your job and you're not reliable and you may not be able to get promoted if you're not totally committed. Or maybe you've already passed up a promotion at work, or maybe you've asked to reduce your work schedule. And now you're thinking, wow, I did all this and I still can't do it. Maybe I need to just quit my job. Do not quit. Find a way to stay in the workplace and use this video if you have to open the door to a conversation with your supervisor or with somebody in the HR department. Now, some caregivers, admittedly, who are older, maybe they're 55 or 60, they may think of taking early retirement to care for an aging parent or a grandparent or somebody else, but doing so really affects the ability of these caregivers to save for their retirement and their health care and their care needs when they're older. So all of this stress in the workplace and caregiving and distractions and all of it, it really does affect companies more than they think. And mostly it's because companies don't realize they have caregivers, and caregivers don't realize that they are caregivers until somebody brings this up and they start doing surveys. And maybe some companies have some employee resource groups that they have started. I speak to a lot of companies and I speak to a lot of groups when I do my elder care consulting and education. So this spiral of caregiving is very challenging. And if you work in healthcare, you probably know that most of the things that cause healthcare issues don't really start out as healthcare issues, right? They start out as problems in life, right? Like having a steady job and being able to pay your bills and buy groceries and pay your utilities and for the care of your parents and transportation to get to work if you're not working remotely. And then if there's a lot of family stress and conflict about, well, who's going to care for mom or dad? Who's going to pay for mom and dad's care? Why can't you give me a break, brother or sister? I'm exhausted. I'm this caregiver. There's all of this stuff. So there's a lot of statistics that you will find if you go down to the link below this video and click on that page. And I'll share some of the sources of the research. But average caregiver, average working caregiver is providing 20 hours a week or more of time and effort to care for a loved one. This average is 3 hours a day. And some of this time, honestly, is during working hours because there's no other way to do it unless companies have flex time or the ability to flex schedules, which would be a really good thing for a caregiver who works. Then another statistic, 30% of caregivers who are caring for an elderly parent or a spouse quit their jobs. How can that be good for the workplace to have all of that turnover and to lose all of that knowledge? Needless to say, it's not good for the caregiver to give up their income and their retirement savings to become a full-time caregiver. While a lot of people think it's a really good idea, in retrospect, it turns out to be very challenging for a lot of reasons. Again, research below on the page that's linked. And then the people who were affected most by caregiving, honestly, are women because they're caregivers all of their lives. Women have babies. They raise children. They take care of their spouses. They take care of both sets of parents. And you know what happens? As a result, men usually die before women. Women are left alone to care for themselves. Many have spent the family income on caring for everybody else. And so women are more likely to end up at the end of life as residents in nursing homes on public assistance with no one to care for them. This is why I am very much an advocate for women, even though you're caregivers, to stay in the workplace and to talk to your HR departments about the fact that caregivers need support. Another statistic, caregivers of people with dementia, sometimes about 20, I think to 30%, die before the person that they care for, which is why it's really important to have a comprehensive caregiving plan. And most caregivers aren't aware of all of the services and everything that goes into that, which is why there's a lot of help and support on my website. And again, I do speaking engagements and education for corporations. Last statistic that I'll offer, and again, there's many more in the research down below, is that it's usually one primary caregiver who steps up. If it's a married couple, obviously the spouse, but then below that, one child, even if there are multiple children, one child steps up and bears the brunt of it all because the others are too busy. They don't want to do it. Maybe they didn't have a good relationship with that parent. Maybe they live far away. Maybe there's just too much else going on in their life. So this single primary caregiver, whoever they are, needs a great deal of support because they give up a lot of their lives. Sometimes they give up their careers, their family life suffers, marriages break down, they don't have a good relationship with their children, they give up their social life, their family, their friends, their health. Stress weighs very heavily on family caregivers who feel like they don't have a choice but to care for this loved one and that there's no resources or options out there for care. I can tell you that there are a lot of resources. It's just the time and effort that it takes to find the right ones. So again, if you're looking for statistics to share with your Human Resources Department, click the page below in this video. There you will find reports and studies from companies like the Harvard Business Journal, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, Connecticut College, other universities that provide a very firm foundation for the importance of corporations and healthcare systems and insurance companies and everyone else out there to support family caregivers, not only in their actions as caregivers, but to support overall health and well-being. Because we know that health has a huge effect on individuals' abilities to work, and especially for HR departments. Health care, health insurance is a huge expense for companies. So supporting family caregivers translates to health care, and it also translates to the cost of health care premiums, which also support employees who are not yet caregivers. So bringing this topic to the attention of human resource departments is really a win-win for everybody. So if you're looking for more information about caregiving, here on my YouTube channel, please follow and like it. There are over 800 videos answering questions caregivers ask. On my website, there is a 60-hour webinar program called How to Care for Aging Parents. Free, no cost. Very detailed information from my years, 20 plus, as a care manager and professional fiduciary for elderly and disabled. I also have a caregiving group on Facebook. It is called The Caregiving Trap. You can go find it there. And I also have a podcast called The Caring Generation. So thank you for being here. Please again, share this video with your human resource department and other people in your company who can make the decision to support working caregivers. We need to make this a conversation that everyone is comfortable having. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. My website's PamelaDWilson.com. Thanks for being here.